Well, hello and welcome back to another round here at CVR, part of the Golden Era Championship. My name's Pirate Laserbeam and I'll be doing the commentary for today's race. Very exciting modellery, and this is going to be a 3-hour race with hopefully a very exciting lineup of drivers. New 1931 cars have entered the mix, and that's going to change up how things potentially run today. A lot of drivers who were previously riding around in Delages have upgraded to some of the new exciting cars on offer. We'll be going through that in a bit more detail in a few more minutes. But yes, weather today for today's race is expected to start out a little bit sunny, but then lead to potentially foggy conditions, a bit like what you're seeing on the screen right now. Hopefully it's not as foggy as shown here, because that will make it a little bit harder to track what's going on out on the track. You can see one of the drivers there that looked like Tollen or Hallen just driving past and disappearing off into the mist. So hopefully we don't get too much obstruction in terms of how much you can see from the commentary side of things. So, following our last round 4 weeks ago at Monaco, we had quite an interesting race. Unfortunately, quite a few people not finishing the race. We had a few DNFs, including the following drivers: Lafrege, Tollenin, Heitinen, Hallen, Cleo, Pekkanen, Henry, Lubramiski and Darling. So some big names who didn't manage to finish at Monaco. That didn't lead to any bankruptcies, but basically Lubramiski was in debt, so had to sell his car again. And some of the bigger names on the grid not receiving any funds for that race as well, but I think it hasn't had a particularly large impact on some of the bigger names in the grid with regards to buying a new car, and a lot of the new drivers have managed to move up to a new vehicle for the race today. Also, looking back at Monaco, we had the following repair bills. As you can imagine, Monaco being quite an interesting track, quite easy to make contact with those walls. We have damage to the following degrees. We have Lafrege with 25,000 for 5 crashes, Renaud 20,000, Crozet 20,000, Uatilla 20,000, all for various crashes of varying speeds. Pekkanen picking up a 15,000 credit repair bill, and then Darling, Tollenin, Lubramiski, Heitinen all picking up 10,000 credits apiece for varying degrees of damage there. And then finally Smith, Henry, Cleo and Hallen all receiving 5,000 credits for just one crash over 50 kilometers an hour. So quite a large number of drivers picked up a bit of a repair bill there, but again didn't lead to any bankruptcies, apart from Lubramiski having to sell their car. So unfortunate for Lubramiski, because picked up a little bit of damage, so a repair bill there, but also a DNF leading to no funds being received. So let's take a look at some of the new vehicles which have entered the fray today. So the Delages used to be... Oh, actually, let me just quickly bring up the starting grid. So, starting grid for today's race is as follows. We've got Darling, Renaud and Borkowski on the front three. And then big names like Nurmi up there in P5. Some other drivers who are also fighting for high positions in the championship overall. A little bit further down, but there's a 3-hour race ahead, so plenty of time to rectify any starting issues. And then going into the standings thus far, you can see that we have the following. So Nurmi leading the group with 290 points, followed closely by Marcus Peltonen with 283. And then Anssi Heitinen is in the 3rd spot with 279. So quite a tight grid for the first 3, and Tollenin there in P4. Again, not a million miles behind, and also in quite close proximity to Uatilla there, with only 3 points separating them. So there's quite a lot of action happening in the top 10 here, and plenty of opportunities for drivers to switch positions as we go through yet another round here in the Golden Era Championship. Going back to the starting grid, just give it a little bit more time to absorb what's going on there. Uatilla down in 15th place, so going to be interesting to see how they fight their way to the front. Yes, plenty of action here coming up today. So let's take a quick look. So Delages used to be the favourite, and for 1931 the landscape has changed significantly. Bugatti releasing 3 new models: the T51, T51-1, and then the T54. Let's talk a little bit about that T54. So Tolonin is the only driver to be in the T54. This has a 300 horsepower engine, which is massive compared to even the T51, which is about 160 horsepower. But this car unfortunately has, it's quite heavy on the tyres. It's pretty fragile mechanically, and it will potentially be a bit of a gamble. Whereas the safer bet is most likely going to be what Nurmi is driving, which is the T51-1. Less horsepower, but a little bit more straightforward in terms of mechanical reliability and so on. The other thing that's also happened is for this year is the fuel feed can be affected through fast long corners, and that can lead to the engine being starved of fuel if you don't have enough fuel in your tank. So it's going to be interesting to see whether the drivers have to change their strategies here at all to compensate for that from a fuel point of view. And there are some long banked corners here at Montvleri. So interesting lineup, quite popular, the T51-1. We're going to see quite a few of those out there on the grid today. And it's a standing start, so it's going to be interesting to see how some of the cars handle that. The other new car on the grid is the Mercedes with the SSKL, which has a cockpit-operated supercharger, and that's going to be interesting. We've also got some differences in some of the Bugattis, I believe. Let me just quickly check here. Never mind, I stand corrected. Let's go back to strategy. So Montvleri is a 12.5 kilometre long tarmac track that allows drivers to use either the smooth SH tyre for the best grip, but they will wear out more quickly, or you can go for the light studs, which will give you a much longer duration, probably full race distance. They will be a bit worn out at the end of that, but you could avoid a change of tyre, which is going to be interesting. And as I said, the race will last 3 hours. That's about 30 laps, and it's going to be interesting to see how the drivers approach this from a pit stop strategy point of view. Okay, just 30 seconds away from the race start. Standing start as usual, and sun shining for now, but fog expected later on. No rain on the agenda, but let's see how this all goes out. I'm expecting Tolonin with a 300 horsepower engine to make a potential early breakaway here, and we're going to have to see how that plays out. The lights are up, engines are revving. And away we go. The Do getting a little bit slow off the line there, while Kwiatkowski and Darling start to make some ground here. But looks like Nurmi and Peltonen already moving up quickly with their Bugattis, and they are out into the front three already. Whilst Tolonin, let's take a look here. The 300 horsepower engine, Tolonin should be a bit of a rocket ship in the early stages here, and you can see that they've moved up to P5 already, making considerable ground in the early couple of corners here. Kwiatkowski now getting overtaken by Peltonen. And thus far, Tolonin is already starting to make some significant ground here with that extra horsepower. A bit further back, we've got Mikola and Ledoux changing positions. Ooh, we've got a car turned around. That's Korkowski on the side there. So Korkowski's obviously got turned around early on. No damage that I can see, but definitely dropped to the last position here, so that's bad news. Tolnin sliding the Bugatti, and that is one of the downsides of the 300 horsepower variant, the T54. It is a little bit of a monster and a little bit hard to control. And you can see actually that Tolnin is actually losing a few positions here, so that could just be the difficulty of controlling this in the slower corners, where it's difficult to get the power down. But in some of the longer banked corners and straights, I expect the T54 to be a bit of a brute. Take a quick look from the onboard with Tolnin here. Despite the high horsepower, the speed isn't picking up as quickly as one might expect, and actually Tolnin being overtaken as they slow down for the left-hander here. Definitely seems to be struggling to tame the T54 or fully apply its power. And as per usual, racing of this era has very limited safety precautions being applied, and the ability for cars to go off track is quite easy. There's Nicola, Kai Severston just rejoining the track there, I stand corrected. So Tolnin and Hallen just overtaking Kai Severston. Again, you can see the rear end of Tolnin's T54 just stepping out as they try and get the power down. And that's going to be one of the primary issues with the T54, but now onto a long straight. This is where the T54 can start to stretch its legs. This looks like Kai Severston is in the same T54. Darling just overtaking Ledoux. Meanwhile, Kai Severston has overtaken Hallen and Tolnin, and Tolnin dropping down to P10 now. Rear end of that T54 is an absolute beast to control. Going up to P5, we've got Heitinen overtaking Crozet. Do you assume P5? Also have Withoft up in P4 as well. Looks like Korkowski overtaking Lafrege. Ledoux and Korkowski trading positions again. You can see Korkowski really struggling with that car. So whilst the Bugattis are a popular choice, they do seem to be offering some difficulty to some of the drivers. Again, Korkowski really struggling there to get the car slowed down and rotated, whilst other vehicles seem to be a little less of a challenge. Leitinen now overtaking Withoft, and actually one thing that we do have here is the extremely high banked corners. Let's go back to Pereira entering the banking here. You can see, I get a sense for the massiveness of this corner and how how steep the banking is. Look at that, no safety precautions at all. If you go off of that edge, you are going to the moon. Here we have Ledoux starting to gain some ground on Darling. Overtakes on the left-hand side, no problems there. Meanwhile, out in front we have Peltonen and Nurmi, both teammates here in their Bugatti T51-1s. And Peltonen taking a little bit of trip off the edge there. Nurmi gaining a little bit of ground as a result of that. And further back we've got Uatilla, again struggling to keep it on the tarmac, and that's allowed Heitinen through on the inside in the number 58 car. Looks like Crozet just went entirely off the track there and has rejoined. Now trying to work their way past Mikola. The Trosty Delage. Whilst not the fastest anymore, the Delage is still a potential contender. Going back now to Korkowski and Tolonen. Korkowski managing to overtake Tolonen. Tolonen now coming back and attempting to get past, but very slow right-hander here. Again, you can see the difficulty for Tolonen of getting the extra power down. Those rear tyres are definitely going to be wearing a little bit more quickly with the amount of sideways flipping that they're doing. So 10 minutes of racing completed already. We've got Peltonen and Nurmi out in front. 10-second gap to Heitinen in P3. Further down here we've got Rosen and Thomas. Thomas overtaking. And the Mercedes just outpacing Thomas here on the back straight here. The mighty SSK. I imagine that means that Haley Smith is in the Bentley Blower, I believe this was. Yes, it is. You can see the ginormous supercharger on the front, and the name Chungus 1. I believe Haley took this vehicle for the first time last round. Haley Smith now putting some challenge to Paul van Rosen in the Mercedes. Edging up alongside now, or attempting to. The Bentley definitely struggled at Monaco. It was certainly not well suited to the tight twisting circuit, street circuit. Whereas here, one would expect it has a little bit more of an advantage, but as yet seems to be struggling to prove itself. Meanwhile at the front we have Peltonen and Nurmi. Both drivers doing very well in the championship standings overall. A regular feature at the front of the grids. Now the Bentley gets a chance to stretch its legs, and Haley Smith blasting past Paul van Rosen there, and the Bentley blower take P18. Now that they're in a long stretch of track, Haley Smith can really open the taps on that supercharged Bentley. Gapping Paul van Rosen by 2.3 seconds as it stands. And that may continue to grow. A bit of grass being kicked up there by Haley Smith, I believe, as Bentley clips the side of the track. Back up to P6, we've got Kai Siversten and Mikkola. Bugatti versus Delage by the looks of it. Henry and La trading places. La and the Bugatti. Henry in the Sunbeam. So 15 minutes in, we have another 2 3/4 hours of racing time remaining, and the grid is starting to spread out as the different driver skills and car performance characteristics start to shape the grid. What will be quite influential is mechanical failures and pit stop strategies. As I mentioned before, those drivers which are on the softer compound will likely make early ground. They have to come in more often, whereas those on the light stud tyre will probably be able to go the race distance, but spend less time in the pits. And with the issue around fuel needing to be quite full to ensure engines don't cut out in the corners, it might favour a high fuel strategy, and that will again limit the amount of time spent in the pits. Once again, our race leaders, Pelton and Nurmi, in formation, about a second apart. Once again, a bit of grass clippings seemingly falling out of the sky. I don't know if that means another car's been through there previously or if it's just a graphical glitch. The background, you can see Heitinen 7 seconds further back, but ever present at the moment. Looks like Haley Smith just overtaking Thomas there. Onboard view with Haley Smith here going through the very steep banking. Those bumps can't be comforting at this speed. 240 kilometers an hour coming out of the end of the banking over the start finish line. But Smith has got a gap of 12 seconds to Henry, and despite the copious amounts of speed and power that the Bentley blower can deliver, that gap doesn't seem to be getting any smaller at the moment. Lefredge overtaking Darling to grab P13. Ooh, and that's, if I'm not mistaken, Darling pulling over to the side. Not sure if that's just mechanical issues or not. Doesn't seem to be any kind of issue with the tyres, but it could be overheating or some kind of mechanical issue. Darling dropping down to P17, Smith through to P16. The bad news for Darling continues, dropping down now to P18. Ledoux overtaking Tolnin there. Tolnin in P12, definitely struggling in that T54. And this is whilst they still have tyre grip, so let's hope that doesn't get too much more of a challenge for Tolnin as the race goes on. Looks like Kai Severson dropping down to P8, having just been overtaken by Mikkola. So, looks like Heitinen is actually gaining a little bit of ground now, 5.3 seconds behind, and that was previously about 7 seconds. So, might see a three-way fight for the front spot start to develop in a few laps' time. The do close proximity to Tolnin at the moment as they approach the steep banking. Let's see what kind of speed Tolnin can get out of his T54 coming through the banking. Enters at 200 kilometers an hour. Seems to be holding steady at that speed. Exiting at around 212. So despite the huge extra horsepower, it seems quite of a challenge for Tolnin to get its speed out of the T54. Hitting 250 kilometers an hour now. But it does seem to be that you have to use it in short bursts. You know, you can't carry the speed through the corners as much as one might wish. And you can see the car just kind of floating around on the wheels there. Does suggest a insufficient amount of grip for the amount of power available. Henry just overtaking Kai Severson. And in P6 we have Crozet and Mikkola going toe to toe. Mikkola now 0.8 of a second behind. And looking for a way to close this gap. Nice clean exit from the right-hander there. That's a slow 90-degree right-hander. I see Crozet just making a little bit of an early getaway there. Perhaps a slightly better acceleration. Let's see what Mikkola can do with a bit of slipstream down here on the long straight. 0.3 of a second. Pops out to the right-hand side. Ready for the overtake to occur. Now side by side, and it's going to be a bit of a gamble down to the braking zone to see who brakes first. I think Mikkola has secured E6 without too much challenge there. Mikkola slightly off-road there, leading to a bit of an off into the hill. Hopefully that hasn't led to too much damage. Now Mikkola up to P6 with a good 1 second gap to Crozet behind. Kwiatkowski also gaining some ground here on Crozet and closing to within 1 second. Here Kwiatkowski overtaking higher up the banking. That allows a higher top speed through the cornering here, and Mikkola further down does seem to be struggling to hold their own against the faster Kwiatkowski. Meanwhile, out in front we have Nurmi and Peltonen still starting to overtake some of the back markers by the looks of it, potentially. Actually, tell a lie, that is Heitinen. And Heitinen... yeah, so they've just overtaken Hallen. Heitinen, interestingly, has closed now to 2.2 seconds. That was originally around 7 seconds of a delta, and now almost on top of Nurmi and Peltonen, sliding the 58 round the corners there. Ooh, and there's Hallen making contact with the environment there. Nurmi closing in on Peltonen here as Heitinen starts to push forward. It looks like Nurmi and Peltonen will have to start to fight a little bit harder now to maintain their lead. Heitinen definitely a man on a mission here to gain some ground. 0.4 of a second and definitely pushing very hard now. I suspect we're going to see an overtake in a few moments' time, as Nurmi seems to be struggling to match the pace that Heitinen is deploying at the moment. On board with Heitinen here, you can see that they are just about to wangle on alongside Nurmi, but a bit of a twisty part of the track. Through the steeped banking now, Heitinen 0.4 of a second behind Nurmi, maintaining the pressure here. Does seem to be struggling a little bit just to close this final few tenths of a second. 222 kilometers an hour. Does seem to be around the top end of this particular model. And after the long straight, you see the relative difference in performance here. So it's not the car top end speed which is making this difference. It's Heitinen finding time in the corners which is allowing them to catch up. Point 0.3 of a second, moves to the left hand side, thinking about a move. On the onboard you can see the desire to push just being offset by the need to slow down at the right time for these corners. Very easy to overcook and overestimate how much grip your car has, but as we all know, these cars are quite good on the power side but struggle on the grip and the braking. Heitinen seeming to gain quite rapidly up until the time that they've joined the back of the train here for Pelton and Nurmi. I wonder if they're just waiting for the right moment to strike, or whether they just haven't quite found a way to make it click yet. Wrong exit from the right hander there. 0.8 of a second behind. No slipstream effect seemingly helping here. And that looks like they're just overtaking Darling again. Darling had to pull off to the side of the track early in the race for some kind of repair. You can see that they're still running in the race, but definitely seem to have an impact on their chances. Redu, or I keep going with them, Redu, Ledoux and Rosen trading positions there. Orva and Rosen in the Mercedes. In the background you can see the Bugatti, sorry, the Bentley with Hayley Smith at the controls. Ooh, Lafrege on the side of the track. Losing out a few positions here to Ledoux, Rosen and Smith. In the horn. Let's go back to the battle for the lead with Heitinen 0.4 of a second behind Nurmi. Once again. Heitinen all over the back end of Nurmi at this stage. Once again, you can just see how close Heitinen is getting here, but just struggling to make that final leap and secure the overtake. Let's see what the final corner through the steep banking can do. Heitinen is gaining some ground here. It seems to be in the corners that they've got the advantage. And there's a little bit of traffic in the form of Lafrege, potentially. Nurmi and Heitinen side by side as they weave through the traffic. They remain side by side. Heitinen just perhaps a touch ahead now as they come up to the right-hander. Nurmi tucks into the slipstream behind Heitinen, trying to offset that 0.2 second gap between the two of them. Does look like Heitinen is through though. 0.6 of a second opening up between themselves and Nurmi. If the ability for Heitinen to catch up with Nurmi in the first place has been anything to go by, then they should be able to open a gap between themselves and Nurmi in relatively short order. There is some traffic up ahead though, we'll have to see how that impacts things. Well, with 2 hours and 20 minutes left in this race, there's plenty of time for this battle between the front three to develop, but at the moment it seems that they're already having a whale of a time here. There's Hayley Smith and the Bentley blower being overtaken as Peltonen, Heitinen and Nurmi start to work their way through the back end of the grid. Heitinen now only 0.5 of a second behind Peltonen, as one of the Mercedes seemed to be well off track there. Is that Paul van Rosen? Possibly. Well, we're almost through the first hour of the racing here at Montlhéry, and it's one hell of a race so far. Marcus Peltonen, Heitinen and Nurmi all in pretty tight formation, although Nurmi is dropping back 2.5 seconds between themselves and Heitinen, and they've been pretty much tracking behind Peltonen for the whole race up until this point by about 1 second. So quite interesting to see Nurmi dropping off performance-wise now. Kai Seversten's in the pit lane. So Ledoux in the pit lane here. Heitinen is still putting pressure on Marcus Peltonen at the front here. 0.5 of a second behind, and you can see how much of a gap they've opened between themselves and Nurmi here. 3 seconds now already between Nurmi and Heitinen. It does seem like Nurmi just struggling a little bit here with their pace, although they are up on their best time. It's just that the front two are pushing that a little bit harder, it seems. Hey Vars, good to see you in chat. I think they're pushing the pedal as much as it will go down. So Heitinen 0.6 of a second still behind Peltonen, pushing hard through the curves here. I wonder how much longer they can keep up this kind of pace, because their tyres, I suspect, if they're running on the softer compound, won't last too long at this kind of rate of knots. The Heitinen does seem to be on a mission here to get to P1. And you can see Peltonen now approaching some of the back markers. Turning up some of the grass there as the drivers wangle their way through the corners. Peltonen now drops to P2 as Heitinen finally breaks through, and Heitinen is now opening up a gap already of 1 second to Peltonen. That leaves both Nurmi and Peltonen, teammates, down in P2 and 3 respectively, with Heitinen gapping them already by 1.5 seconds. So after a long fought battle, Heitinen opens up the gap here in P1 to 2 seconds, and Mikkela's in the pits there. Heitinen does seem to be pushing really hard here pace-wise. I don't know if Peltonen and Nurmi are just playing a bit of a longer game here, but Heitinen is definitely carrying a little bit more speed here than anyone else. Last lap time of 5:25.181, which is significantly faster than both Peltonen and Nurmi. Meanwhile, Tollenin in P9 in the mighty T54 does seem to be in a pretty safe spot here. 1.5 minutes ahead of La in P10, but equally 2 minutes behind P8, so quite a bit of a gap here. Henry in P11, getting a bit of pressure here from Silverstone. Silverstone looking for a bit of a overtake potential here. So Nurmi 1.1 seconds behind Peltonen still, whilst Heitinen opens the gap to almost 3 seconds now. And you can see the fog is starting to roll in here, which might make things a little bit more challenging for the drivers. Paul van Rosen and Lefrage going side by side. And Paul van Rosen sliding the Mercedes through the corner here as Lefrage just managed to sneak on through. So Paul van Rosen now 5 seconds behind Lefrage. And for number 9, Mercedes struggling a little bit to match the performance that Lefrage was able to offer. Our podium holders are relatively safe at the moment. 1 minute and 25 second gap between P3 to P4. Withoft here, and in P4 is just dealing with some traffic of their own. So Withoft 2 minutes behind Nurmi. They do have Attila only 5.9 seconds behind. Meanwhile, Mikola and Thomas fighting their way through the steep banked corner. And Mikola carrying a little bit more speed here on the inside, just overtaking Thomas now and opening a bit of a gap. Equally, you have, I believe that's Withoft. Yes, it is, fighting through alongside, and looks like they're going to be lapping Mikola in the process. So Withoft is through the traffic now, opening up a little bit more of a gap to Nicola. That being said, they've just gone off track a little bit there, so has Nicola though, slightly further over than they want to be, and definitely well into the trees there. So, good thing they didn't hit anything substantial, I think. So Mikla continues to run in P13, 22 seconds behind Kai Severston, although it's Henry and Severston who are seeming to be the next up for a battle. Herrera's in the pits, so is Thomas. And Henry here in the Sunbeam has Kai Severston following up from behind. Heitinen now 5.2 seconds ahead of Peltonen in the lead. And here's Kai Severston overtaking Henry, following a good exit from one of the corners. So finally into the second hour of the race. First hour leading to quite a spread out grid, as is common in this type of format of racing. A few pit stops, but none of the major players have yet come for the pit stop. Heitinen, Pelton, Nurmi and so on. We'll have to see whether they're due a pit stop anytime soon. Nurmi continuing to be about 1.3 seconds behind Pelton, as they have been for the entirety of the race thus far. The fog continuing to get a little bit thicker here, minute by minute. Yeah, there's an extra camera angle that I can use here, which is a little bit more easy to see. Attila here in the number 14, currently running P5 still. Dealing with a little bit of traffic in the shape of XVII, I think that was. Meanwhile, Mikola and Severson trading positions here as Kai Severson just gets overtaken. Mikola moving up to P11. And further back down, ooh, actually, let's have a look. Withoft has just been overtaken, I think, by Attila. Allen and Ledoux just trading positions in the final corner. Looks like Ledoux coming into a pit stop. Here's our race leader, Antti Haitinen, finishing up their lap here. So Uatilla maintains their position here, 10 seconds ahead of ahead of Withoff now, and that gap only seems to be getting larger. The fog definitely making things a little bit more challenging here, although from the driver's perspective you can see it's not much better actually. They have limited visibility into the next corners, and that's going to make braking zones a little bit harder to assess and judge. You can just see another competitor ahead on the circuit, and it's going to be a real challenge if you're carrying any significant overspeed here. In some cases you're going to have a real hard time seeing where your potential overtake victim is going to be. Actually, it looks like one of the drivers just drove off in the wrong direction potentially. Go back to Uatilla though. So P4. You can see now just how, actually looks like it's snowy, but I think that's just the fog impacting the colour of the ground. Definitely going to be struggling here from a fog point of view with the commentary stream. Cars are only visible for a few moments before disappearing off into the fog. Have a look here in P5. We've got Kwiatkowski challenging Withoff and managing to get past. Withoff definitely slower now, falling off now by quite a rate of knots compared to Kwiatkowski. An hour and 47 minutes remaining. Have a look here at Pelton and Nurmi. Nurmi now below 1 second, facing up behind Peltonen. So Peltonen 6 seconds behind Heitinen now. That's quite a significant gap, and as the fog descends I think it will slow things down a little bit. We'll have to see whether each driver can capitalise on that or not. We've got Pereira and Tolnin in the pits. Tolnin in the I've forgotten the name of the car. Bear with me. T54 I think it was. Yes, T54 is potentially doing tyres and fuel. See how long this pit stop takes. But they're about to get overtaken by La, and then in short order that will be Kai Severson as well. Pereira is back out on track though. Although about to lose position there to Kai Severson. So Tolnin remains in the pits, and they look like they're about to be overtaken by Henry here. That will drop them down to P15. And there it is. Henry now up to P14. Tolnin down to P15. Tolnin's still in the car, so they haven't disconnected. And it's just a question of how long this pit stop's going to take, because they have a lot of grounds to cover once they exit the pit lane. But there's still an hour and 43 minutes to do that in. Let's go to P10, where we have Kai Severson and Pereira. And Pereira is actually gaining some ground here, 0.5 of a second. Again, being cautious on the brakes because braking zones are an issue, and you can see Pereira missing the braking zone there and actually making contact with Crozet. Trying to get the engine going again and reversing, but they're in a bit of a precarious position here though, because this corner seems to be catching out a few drivers. Thankfully, Pereira back out under their own steam. And Withoft is also off track, but manages to get going again. What is incredible though is Heitinen here opening up such a significant gap. 7.4 seconds, and also Nurmi seems to have had a bit of an issue here. They're 24 seconds behind their teammate Peltonen, and for the most part of this race that hasn't been any longer than 1.5 seconds. So Mikkola is still underway here. It does seem like there's been a bit of an issue with the timing board. It shows a 0-second gap to Crozet, whereas Crozet is still off track here. Although they seem to be just about getting their Delage back into gear, and they're re-entering the race. managed to maintain P7 despite being sat on the side of the track for quite some time, and that just shows how large a gap there is between Crozet and Mikkola. But now the gap to P6 for Crozet is 1 minute and 53 seconds. Hayley Smith in the Bentley Blower is in the pit lane as well. Chungus 1. And then you have Paul Van Rosen in the Mercedes down in P16. Let's go to P9 where we have La and Kai Siversen about 1 second behind. Through the final banked corners here. Track temperature's actually increased now from 15 degrees to 22 degrees, and that's interesting considering the fog has rolled in. I would have expected it to be doing the opposite. Tolnin is back out. Oh, I say that just as I cut to them. They are currently rolling their way up a bank, almost taking out a bunch of spectators, and they've actually parked themselves on the side of the track. I think they struggled there with the power of this car, 300 horsepower. Quite a significant upgrade from some of the other ones, and the briefing did mention how much of a handful this car would be. So Withoft is in the pits now, as is Kai Siversen. Yep, Tolnin is very brave indeed for taking his car. It seems to be an absolute handful. So Tolnin here, best lap time of 5:48 compared to Heitinen's 5:24. That just shows how much of a significant difference in performance there is between the Bugatti that Heitinen is driving, which I believe is the T24-1. T51-1, sorry, I stand corrected. That's the same model being driven by Peltonen and Nurmi. And it has significantly lower horsepower than the T54 driven by Tolnin, but you can actually use it in quite an effective way. And you can see just how much speed Heitinen is carrying here. The interesting thing about this championship has been the developing nature of the competitor cars, because we started out in 1923, I think it was, when everyone was driving kind of Sunbeams and so on, and every round introduces the potential for a new era of car to be brought in, and drivers can sell and exchange their cars and so on. So it has meant that depending on which car you've managed to afford, your chances of winning a race can drastically change. Then you also have the fact that there's different generations of cars out here on the track at the same time, which is quite an interesting concept in and of itself. And Crozet, once again, comes off the same corner, ends up facing the wrong direction. You're going to have to be careful now not to catch out any of the race leaders. Heitinen remains in the front, 135 left on this race, but 4.6 second gap between Peltonen and Heitinen. So Pereira back in the pits actually, as is Mikkola. Getting a bit of an onboard view here from Heitinen's perspective. They're 6.5 seconds down on the lap time. Are sliding through. Now the question is, will the fog continue to get worse, or is this the extent of it? And is there any chance of the sun peeking back through before the end of the race? There's Lafrege coming through in 3:14, followed closely by Heitinen. Heitinen round the outside. That's to the inside actually for the exit. Almost losing the rear end. Does this suggest that Heitinen's coming in? Yes, it does. And Peltonen stays out. Now that could be that Heitinen's on the softer compound and Peltonen isn't, but let's see what Nurmi does. Nurmi's coming around the final corner, right on the upper limit. Let's see if they drop down to pit. Oh, they're staying out. So Heitinen drops back down to P3. They have a 1 minute and 43 second gap to Korkowski, so they should in theory be able to get back out before Korkowski comes through. Crozet in the pits up ahead there, just getting repairs, I would imagine. So we've got Crozet, Pereira and Heitinen in the pit lane. Korkowski still a long way off, it seems, from overtaking Heitinen. If this is a one-stop race for Heitinen, then they did a pretty good job on their first hour and a half stint. If they can recreate that for the second half, they're going to be in a really strong position here, and they're actually just leaving the pit lane now. So that pit stop has cost Heitinen 1 minute and 22 seconds of gap to Nurmi. And almost 2 minutes on Peltonen. So if the next lap involves a pit stop for Peltonen and Nurmi, then you will see that flip around, but I wonder if Peltonen will see if they can push this as far as they can. Another competitor on the side of the track there. Didn't quite see who that was, but another car waiting on the side of the track. So Nurmi is still 28.5 seconds behind Peltonen. That gap doesn't seem to be getting any smaller at the moment. Heitinen is still 120 behind Nurmi, but that gap is getting a little bit shorter. Korkowski's decided to go for the pits, but they are 1 minute and 52 seconds ahead of Attila, so they should be pretty safe there in terms of holding on to P4. Peltonen still cracking along here. 30-second gap to Nurmi now, so they are extending their lead just a little bit. Heitinen now only 118 behind Nurmi, so Heitinen's climb back up to the top is already well underway. At the moment, most cars do seem to be at least 20 seconds apart from Prix, who's within 5 seconds of Henry. So Viles, in answer to your question, we have Sunbeam, Delage, various Bugattis. There's at least a few other models in here, but it changes every race. I'm going to have to refresh my memory to see exactly who's driving what. Yeah, there we go. Marcus Peltonen entering the pit lane as I suspected. And that has meant that Nurmi might have an opportunity here to overtake. But Nurmi's also coming in to join their teammate in the pits. With Nurmi and Peltonen in the pit lane, it's just a matter of time until Heitinen can get through and overtake. But to give you the full comprehensive answer, Viles, we've got Nurmi in the Bugatti T51-1 with the silvery livery here, and then Peltonen is also driving the same. Heitinen is in the same as well, this time the number 58 car. Uatila and Korkowski are both in the Bugatti T51-1, so a bit of a common theme here. Withoft is our first driver who's not. They're in the Delage, currently off-roading by the looks of it. So seems to have a little bit of an issue by the looks of the skid marks there. We've got Crozet in the Delage 15S8 as well. So yeah, Crozet, La, Mikkola, they're all in the same Delage. Darling is the next up, which is a Bugatti T39A, which is the 1926 model. So you can see that we're in the 1931 cars, and Darling's driving quite an older gen car here. Kai Siverton in the 1931 T51-1, seemingly struggling a little bit with it to keep it on the track. We've also got the Alex Henry Special, which is the Sunbeam Grand Prix. Polonin is in another Bugatti, this time it's the T54. This is a particularly tricky car to drive. It has 300 horsepower, but the same brakes and so on that everyone else is getting, so very difficult car to control. Kayla Fredge, T39A from 1926. Also got the Mercedes here, so this is Paul van Rosen in the 1931 Mercedes SSKL. And then we have a very different car altogether, which is the number 34, which is the Eric Hallin Talbot 700. And Renaud Ledoux is also in the Talbot 700. Hayley Smith is in the Bentley, the only one in the championship so far to be driving the Bentley blower. They've named it Chungus 1. And then, let's not forget, the mighty Amel car. The Amel CGSS Autoette, which is a... well, I understand the principal feature of this car is that it turns petrol into noise, but not a lot of power. I think you can hear someone coming up in the background. Yeah, that's Kayla Fredge in the T39A Bugatti. Closing at some rate of knots. The Amel car just seems to be, unfortunately, extremely anemic on power. If you go to the onboard view, you'll see what the overtaking speed looks like here. As Lafredge starts to line up. Honking the horn as they go past as well. So there's Lafredge overtaking the Amel car, driven by Clio. Although Clio does seem to have a little bit of an advantage in the corners, but not for long. So, as suspected, Heitinen back into the lead of this race now. 1 hour and 20 minutes left on the clock, and they are 15 seconds clear of the closest competition, which is Pelton. You get a lot of honking of the horn in this league files. Let's talk a little bit about tyre compound. Actually, let's have a quick look at Crozet, because Crozet seems to be having a bit of a bad day. They have crashed. And they've lost both rear wheels. Or rear tyres. I believe they can repair one, if not two. But this doesn't look good for Crozet. Thankfully, their nearest competition, Darling, is in the pit lane, and Kai Siverson's 2 minutes behind Darling, so if Crozet can get this repaired and out on the track, they should be okay. But they unfortunately have crashed in a bit of a ditch, and I've seen it before. These cars just don't have the ability to climb an incline, even as gentle as this one, if they've lost a wheel and if they're starting from a standing start. So it's going to be interesting to see whether Crozet can get underway again. You know, while we wait for this situation to resolve itself, let's talk a little bit about compound. So Aitanen, Peltonen, Nurmi, they're all on the soft compound, so that probably explains why they did a stop at around halfway through. Uatilla is on the LS compound, and that might mean they don't need to pit, but then they are 4 minutes behind anyway. Probably actually, I'm just noticing the have you noticed the skid marks on that hill over there? I think various drivers have had a bit of a tumultuous time coming through here. You can see Crozet spinning their way along the fence line here with their skid marks, but Uatilla on the LS compound suggests that the LS compound, whilst it might mean you don't have to pit, the deficit you receive through slower lap times on those compounds isn't enough to compensate for the fact that the softer compound can give you just so much more time. Viles, he is currently repairing one or both of the rear wheels. You can see that the punctures on the rear are, I guess, complete in the fact that they have removed the rubber from the wheels entirely. And I think you can complete a roadside repair, but we're going to have to see if Crozet can get this out of the ditch. It might not be a race over. It might not be, but in this league, if you do return to the pit lane, you know, by using the teleport, then you basically get a DNF. So your options are try and nurse the car back to the pit lane, or give up. So I think given that Crozet hasn't disconnected and hasn't teleported back, they are waiting for a wheel repair to occur. And then once that's happened, they should be able to get their car out of here. At least if they can do one rear wheel, that might be enough. Just take a little bit of time though to complete those repairs, so we'll have to just hang here for a second. Not a lot of close battling happening elsewhere, so we're just going to hang with Crozet here and see if we can see how long this takes. There we go, so rear left wheel is now repaired. And yeah, so just going to go for the one rear left to get the engine started again. And then they have to try and get up and out of here, which is, as I mentioned, not the easiest thing to do when you've got one driving wheel and it's about the size of a bicycle wheel. The rear right wheel getting very spicy. But they should be okay. And as they re-enter the track, they're on their way again. So, well done, Crozet. They are now going to be a mobile chicane for some period of time. Rear wheel spitting up sparks. I think that's Chloe in the Amel car coming up now. Yep, there we go. Now it's pretty much a case of Crozet just trying to nurse the car back to base. If they can get it back to the pit lane, they can repair, and then they can hopefully hold on to their position. I mean, depending on how long it takes them to get back, they may be able to hold on to P14, but it does seem like they've just actually overheated the engine. Either that, or they're going to try and go for the other repair on the side of the track here. You can see that their car is kind of drifting slightly back onto the track though, so they're going to have to be careful. But it might be that they've gone for the second wheel repair because that will allow them to get back a little bit more quickly. And if they try and wheel spin their way there. That might cause more harm than good. Oh, engine's coming back on. There we go, rear wheel, both repaired now. So I think that was Crozette's plan, just try and repair one wheel on the side of the track and then get going again, but then decided that actually two would be better than one. Utilla's in the pit lane. Now Crozette's going to have to be very careful here not to crash the car anymore, because that's cost them quite a bit of time, and whilst they have a 2.25 gap to Paul van Rosen in the Mercedes, they need to try and hold on to this as much as they can. Still amazed at the pace that Heitinen's bringing to this race. Look, they're 27 seconds ahead of Pelton at this stage. That is quite considerable. Oh, but they are sliding off the track, and they almost go into the same fence that Crozet just did. And another car turned around. Mikkola, potentially. Yeah, it's Mikkola and Hallam. The Heitinen just set the best sector 2 of the race, 3 minutes and 3 seconds, 992 milliseconds. So, despite the race being 3 hours, we only have 1 hour and 10 minutes remaining. At this stage, the top 3 are actually close enough that one small hiccup, Pelton and Heitinen, could dramatically change the running order. You can see with the weaving parts of the track, it just takes one little mistake and that can be race over for some of these drivers. But XVII, it's good to see they are back out on track and going strong. I think the tyre damage seems to be the only damage they've received, because they are cracking on. Although they will be coming around the final corner, potentially heading for the pits. They do seem to be doing that because they are slowing down quite some bit in their delage. Yeah, I would say they are definitely coming in. So XVII obviously repairing some damage that they couldn't fix on the side of the road, but they did manage to get their wheels sorted. Meanwhile in P6 we've got La with Withoft about 12 seconds behind. But that gap's getting steadily longer because, lo and behold, Withoft has only got one functioning wheel. They've got 3 punctures somehow. And they're now working their way back to the pit lane. Now they are struggling to keep the car in a straight line, and I wonder if that's going to be an issue for other drivers trying to overtake, but thankfully they are coming through to the banked corner, and that should mean that they can stay clear of any other competitors. Talking of which, here comes one now. And that looks like Nurmi or Peltonen. So Withoft's just nursing the car back to the pit lane and going over the grass for the last little bit of it. A bit risky actually, because you can get bogged down in the grass, but they've decided to go direct. And they're in the pit lane, so let's have a look at Tolnin in their mighty T54. Absolutely rocketing along, 240 kilometers an hour. You see just how much hard work is going into keeping Tolnin's car going in the right direction. Let's take a look on the onboard view here. Let's just see how much counter steer is being required. Down to 35 kilometers an hour for that corner, and then immediately getting an opposite lock kind of in there as they try to correct the car from over-rotating. So you can see why the briefing note said that this car is difficult on the tyres. But when you get the car going, all 3 of its gears, you have a little bit more in the way of straight line speed, although Tolnin doesn't seem to be opening the taps too much. That's probably because I know there's another corner coming up. And there's Korkowski just sneaking on through. Let's see what Tollenin can do though once he gets onto a straight and can open the taps on this 300 horsepower beast. You see Korkowski being reined in very quickly now. But look how much of a challenge this is for Tollenin to know where the braking point is. They've got very, very little time to identify the braking point and react accordingly as they try and slow down, and Korkowski here in the corner is probably going to be a little bit more dominant, so interesting to see how quickly that straight line speed advantage falls away once you come into the corners. And there we have it. Korkowski back into the lead. Tollenin there putting his foot down and the rear end of the car wasn't pointing in the right direction. It just kind of prolonged the corner as the rear end didn't lock in. Here back on the straights again. Yeah, rapidly Tollenin is able to gain ground on Korkowski, but then once again another corner. That can cause a bit of an issue. Here's Tollenin coming back into the pit lane. Well, what they thought was the pit lane, but just missing it slightly. So La, Mikkola, Tollenin all in the pits. Whereas Korkowski in number 28 car in P5 is only 10 seconds ahead of Severston at the moment, and that could all change. So Kai Siversen 16 seconds behind Korkurski at the moment, so seems to be falling further behind. So just dropped under the hour of race time remaining there. 57 minutes and 53 seconds to go. And at the moment our top three seem to be relatively stable. Leitonen leading the pack here with a 37-second gap to Peltonen. Last lap was a 5:25.206, which is about 3 seconds short of their best time. Meanwhile, Peltonen slower there with a 5:26.898 on the last lap. And then Nurmi further back in P3 with a 21-second gap to P2. Nurmi hitting the corners as hard as they possibly can here, looking for every second they can gain. Their best lap time is a 5:24.995, which I think is the fastest of the... yeah, fastest of the top three, that's for sure. If I stand corrected, actually no, Heitinen with a 5:22.860, so a significant improvement there over the other two. Looks like Henry in the Sunbeam. So Heitinen still pushing at the front here, 35 seconds ahead of Peltonen as well, so unmatchable pace at this point in time. Down here in P9 we've got Lafrege in the Bugatti. Around the final corner comes Lafrege. Pretty on par with their lap time, given the length of the laps. 1.2 seconds down isn't a significant amount, to be honest. Ooh, Lafrege almost putting the car into the same ditch that we saw Crozet in earlier on. I like how Lafrege has got a rust-themed livery on the car here. So Ledoux going up to P15 there, following Hallen and Mikkola being in the pits. And the foggy conditions continuing to make it challenging to see what's going on here, but cars just appearing and disappearing into the mist. Seemed like it might be getting a little bit less foggy. Yes, it does seem to have been quite a rapid clear up there, but clearing up nonetheless. Rosette's in the pits. So Kai Sivertsen's coming into the pits, or has entered the pits, and La is only 1 minute and 15 seconds behind. That might be close enough that they can overtake, but we'll have to see. Might be that Kai Stevenson's just doing a splash and dash, in which case they won't be in here too long. 48 minutes and 51 seconds remaining though. Darling here in P8 with Lafredge only 3.7 seconds behind. We might see a little bit of a battle unfold here shortly. So Darling here, 2.3 seconds ahead of Lafredge at the moment. Lafredge is closing quickly though. And into the final corner they go. Look at the closing speed there between Aitanen and and Darling, just like he was standing still. So Darling still 2.2 seconds ahead. Ooh, and there's that corner which is catching out so many drivers. Darling just almost narrowly avoiding a trip into the fence, just like Crozet showed us the consequences of happening a few laps ago. And that's allowed Lafredge to get into a closer position now, 1.4 seconds behind. There's Paul van Roosen, the number 9 Mercedes SLKR. And Lafredge now sub 1 second behind Darling. That doesn't seem to be too much of a challenge at all. So 0.7 seconds ahead now. Darling, I think will struggle to maintain pace with Lafredge, given how quickly they were caught up by Lafredge leading up to the overtake. But they may yet surprise us. They are in the same car after all. Lafredge getting a slightly better exit there. I think Darling's cooked that one. Yeah, I think Lafredge is free and clear. Paul van Rosen getting lapped by the looks of it. Though in a straight line, I think the Mercedes does have a bit of grunt. And it looks like Darling's just managed to overtake Lafredge, only to have it very rapidly change back to how it was before. I think Darling just came in a little bit too hot into that corner and did a good job of not hitting Lafredge in the process, but just did overcook it a little bit, and Lafredge managed to hold on to the P8 position there. They're quite incredible, but Heitinen out here in front has opened up almost a whole minute now. They're 42 seconds they're approaching here of gap to Marcus Peltonen. And that's just one hell of a level of pace that they've been deploying here. I mean, Marcus Peltonen and Nurmi are by no means slow drivers, so the fact that Heitinen's come out here and absolutely destroyed their times is it's quite impressive. Especially considering they're driving the same car on the same tyre compound. Heitinen just going over the crest of the hill down to the fence. A little bit of that inside concrete rumble board there just to cut the corner slightly. The remnants of the fog still hovering about. So closing into the last 38 minutes of this race. Darling and Lafredge remain about 5 seconds apart. Heitinen out in front by an absolute country mile, 43 seconds clear now of Marcus Peltonen. Nurmi 20 seconds behind Peltonen, but still very much on the podium. And then these front three have a 1.3 lap gap to Uatila, who is currently running in P4. Korkowski about 6 minutes behind Uatila. Stevenson about 2.5 minutes behind Korkowski. So pretty chunky gaps. Don't expect to see a lot of change in these positions between now and the end of the race. Lafredge and Darling about 7 seconds apart, so I think Lafredge is opening this gap continually and will continue to do so unless there's any unforeseen pit stops. Henry is in the pits right now in the Sunbeam. Now, Henry didn't used to have a Sunbeam. They had a they had a Sunbeam at the beginning of this league, and then they switched to a different vehicle, and they've switched back. So I wonder if that's due to finances. They've had to sell the car and revert back to one of their previous favourites. Colin also in the pits, as is Cleo and Crozet. So looks like Cleo is still in the race, but Crozet has disconnected. Haley Smith still driving the Chungus one, and are about to actually overtake quite a number of drivers if they can get through here before Tolonin or Cleo leave the pit lane. They're going to overtake Crozet for sure. They move up to P16. They're obviously lapped by Tolonin, so they haven't overtaken Tolonin. An angry sounding engine from the Bentley there. There was Heitinen. And here's Heitinen coming through. Ooh! Heitinen's off the track. Manages to avoid hitting the fence though. But gosh, that corner is absolutely deadly by the looks of it. You can't really see it coming. And Heitinen's overtaken the Bentley. Here comes Peltonen now up to the same corner. A blind crest and then onto the brakes. Over that blind brow, trying to hit that inside curve. And Nurmi's up next. Let's have a watch about how they handle this. It's really this blind brow here where you have to just try to guess it just right. You can't see the corner that you're entering, you just know it's there. There's Lafredge. So Lafrege running in 8th place still, with Darling 11 seconds behind. You see the considerable difference in pace here. So best lap time for Darling was a 6:01, Heighton was a 5:22. The 38-second difference there. Sounded like Withoft was just getting back under power there. Following a slight off. A very solid green livery. Withoft going quite wide off the track there. So Tolnin is still in the pit lane. Here comes Heitinen into the pits. Now, I wasn't expecting this. 30 minutes left to go. This will cost them the lead because Marcus Peltonen will be coming through, as will Nurmi. This might just be a splash and dash. Oh, it seems to be. They're back out. And I think we're going to see Marcus Peltonen coming around the corner in just a second, but possibly not close enough to overtake, although actually Heitinen does have a 4-second lead, but there's Peltonen. Peltonen is still closing rapidly. Sub 2 seconds now. And unfortunately Tolonin's out of the race, having had a brake failure and crashing pretty bad. I believe they missed their braking point and then had a bit of a catastrophic crash. So Peltonen now 1.5 seconds behind Heitinen. Let's see whether they can do anything with this. They obviously have slightly different fuel strategies because Heitinen came in for a splash and dash. Peltonen may be carrying more fuel. And remember, there is that issue of the fuel tank needing to be full enough to ensure the engine gets enough fuel through some of the long corners. Ooh, and Heitinen's just come off the track. But Peltonen hasn't caught up just yet. But yeah, Peltonen just seems to be unable to keep pace with Heitinen. He's getting close, but Heitinen is just opening up that gap every time. So 27 minutes left to go. The last half an hour of this race. 2.5 hours of racing time completed, and Marcus Peltonen and Heitinen are separated by a mere 3-second gap. The fog has now fully cleared, and we are back to some glorious sunshine here. Korkowski there being overtaken. You can hear what sounds like a car off the track, but going to the onboard view from Heitinen's point of view to see if we can see what's going on there. Might have been on the return part of the circuit. Peltonen is still 4 seconds behind at this stage, but like someone just coming off ahead of Heitinen there. Looks like that could be Korkowski. Yes, it is, and they've rejoined just behind Peltonen. Around the final corner, Heitinen goes. Still 4.5 seconds clear of Peltonen. And actually about to... I was going to say improve their lap time, but that's just they've just gone over the start-finish line there, so it's just starting the new lap. But 5:32 for the last lap. 5:28 for Peltonen, but I think that caught a little bit of Heitinen's lap exit, so... or pit lane exit. Avoiding the tricky fence there. Korkowski in the pit lane after the little accident, but just leaving now. As we near the last 20 minutes of this race, it feels like Heitinen, Peltonen and Nurmi won't be trading places. I mean, categorically I think unless something dramatic happens, they will be on the podium. The question is which order. Peltonen and Heitinen might be up for a little bit of debate there, but Nurmi feels like a solid third place at this stage. Given that Uatila is 1.4 laps behind, and then Kai Sivertsen is a further 1.5 laps behind that. What's particularly impressive is Heitinen's consistency through this race. Given it's a 3-hour race and they've been racing for 2 hours and 40 or so minutes, the consistency in their lap time is impressive. And Heitinen managing to maintain his 5-second gap to Peltonen, no problems at all. I wonder why their pit stop was required, if it was just to top up with fuel, or perhaps they'd misjudged how much fuel they were going to need. Let's see if the last 20 minutes has anything in store as a surprise for Heitinen, given they've had such a solid run so far. A real shame if they would pick up any kind of damage at the last minute. Jeopardise their win here today. Such a hard fought victory it will be. So, Tolnin, Crozet, Mikola, Pereira, Thomas, all out of this race at this stage. Quite a shame when you don't see certain people finish the race, but accidents do happen. So 18 minutes to go. Heitinen extending the gap even further at this stage, 5.7 seconds. Seems like Haley Smith and the Bentley blower struggling here as much as they did at Monaco. Currently running P16. can see both Heitinen and Peltonen getting the rear end kicked out a little bit through that corner. Into the tight right-hand 90 degrees corners we go. These ones are just there to catch you out. This one in particular has caught a few drivers out, catching in those hay bales. For the long straight. Despite Heitinen being 4.5 seconds off their best at this stage, Peltonen still not gaining any ground, it seems. It is amazing watching two cars separated by less than 5 seconds after having raced for 2¾ hours. When you have other cars just a few positions further down separated by laps. There's Haley Smith and the Bentley Blur just roaring past. Belsky in the pits. Still in the car, so good news. No disconnection by the sounds of it. They have a 4-minute lead on Henry, so I don't think they're going to be losing a position here. That was the sound of Heitinen just roaring past. So just 12.5 minutes left in this. Walkowski's still in the pits. Henry's actually getting closer though. So just 24 seconds before Henry in the Sunbeam overtakes Kwiatkowski. You get a pretty good angle here from the camera of Henry coming around those banked corners. There they are. I think they might be coming into the pits as well though, potentially. Yes they are. So what could have been an overtake has now been joined by a similar pit stop. There goes Henry. Just a quick splash and dash. Kwiatkowski seems to have disconnected. The driver is no longer in the vehicle. That's bad news. So Henry moves up to P9. Kwiatkowski potentially will begin a downward descent as the likes of Withoft, Ledoux, Hallin and so on come past. Into the last 10 minutes we go. Peltonen now 4 seconds behind Heitinen, so it has closed in 1 second. Let's see if they've got anything left in their tank to challenge Heitinen for the win. That 4 second gap still holding steady between these two. Go for the onboard view with Marcus Peltonen and see if we can see any change in their approach. So best lap time is the 5:25.467 and the last lap's 5:27. So remarkable consistency for their best lap time. Amazing in the slow corners how much momentum these cars seems to carry. Always seem like they're sliding off into the wall, but then just caught at the last second. Challenging track this one by the looks of it. Corner must be at least 50 degrees banking. Quite something watching your car go through at that angle. And here we go, Marcus Peltonen now 2.2 seconds behind Heitinen. I wonder if he's been just holding off, ready for the assault in the last few minutes of this race, but we're down to the last 2 laps and Marcus Peltonen is only 2 seconds behind Anssi Heitinen at this point. Ooh, and a bit of traffic here in the form of Haley Smith in the Bentley. Marcus Peltonen still managing to stay close behind. 2.3 seconds still. That gap between Peltonen and Heittonen is shortening now. 1.7 seconds. Bit of traffic for Heittonen. It looks like Ledoux, who does a good job of operating under blue flags there. You just can't believe a 3-hour race comes down to 1.3 seconds, but that's what we're witnessing here. He's a whole minute behind Peltonen at the stage. It's just coming down to Peltonen and Heittonen. Who's gonna push their car a little bit further? And Peltonen seems to be finding some energy at the last second from somewhere. Sub 1 second gap now. Through that very, very slow right-hander. And onto the back straight. 5 minutes, 45 seconds to go. Look how close these guys are. Back temperatures increased dramatically up to 36 degrees Celsius now. It's been slowly climbing since the beginning of the race. I think it was 15 to start with. It's over doubled. Also, track conditions are now optimum, 100%. And there's basically no wind to talk about. So here comes Peltonen. Slipstream. 0.4 seconds. They are gaining. Heittonen goes to the left-hand side. But it looks like Peltonen is going to squeeze down the inside and over-judges that. And he's up the bank. I did not expect that from Peltonen. That was very much the opposite of what I was expecting there. But I was thinking, how can he possibly go for the inside line here? That was very brave. I wonder if that was brakes or brakes fade. I'm not sure. So with 4 minutes and 20 seconds left on the clock, Marcus Peltonen is back at 1.1 seconds. But as Tolonen points out in chat here, Heittonen does seem to be struggling a little bit. Could just be some mechanical issues coming in at the last second. Let's hope that doesn't... Ooh! What's happened there? Heittonen has slid off the track and hit a wall. That might be related to the mechanical issues that were theorised in chat just now, and that's Peltonen through to P1. Unfortunately, the camera angle just wasn't quite good enough there to see exactly what happened, but with 1 lap left to go, Heittonen is 6.5 seconds behind Peltonen now. And look at this, that's a lot slower than we're expecting, so bad luck for Heittonen after such an incredible run this race. To have it all taken away at the last second would be a real shame, but I think they should be good for this final lap. That's the sense from the inside. They are slowing down a little bit through the corner. I wonder if they're going to be pitting or not. No, they're going to stay. Let's hope they don't regret that, but 10 seconds behind Peltonen now. At least Nurmi is not within striking distance. They're a minute 10 seconds behind. Sounds like a Amel car in the middle of the track there. That's not good news for Heitinen. That's the last thing you probably needed, is a Amel car in the middle of the track. And yes, I think the battle is well and truly over. 1.5 minutes left on the clock. 12.9 seconds separating Peltonen and Heitinen, and it's very much gone in the favour of Peltonen. Suspect due to some late stage mechanical issues from Heitinen. They're really struggling now. Nurmi's in the pits, however, and wasn't expecting that at this stage, but Heitinen definitely struggling with some mechanical issues. I guess with all the will in the world, if your car gives up on you, then that puts you at quite the disadvantage. There's Cleo in the Amel car, going in the right direction again. And the timer has finished. It is the last lap. Marcus Peltonen will be on their way to victory in just a few moments. Probably about another 2 minutes and 30 seconds to go based on the, 1 minute and 30 seconds to go based on the lap time for Marcus Peltonen here. Last lap was a 5:30. Does look like Heitinen is still on track for that P2 though. Nurmi a good 3.5 minutes behind. So Peltonen will be absolutely on their best behaviour now to avoid contact at this stage of the race. They are all but winning this race. If they get to the line in one piece, they will be raising that trophy in the top spot. And here's the last corner. right at the top of this banked corner. Imagine if you got a flat tyre at this point and just lost traction. That would be a very, very, very short trip over the top. And there we have it. Marcus Peltonen wins the 3 hours here at Montenay, and that leaves Marcus Peltonen on the top spot. Heitinen, unfortunately, coming in second place, but very well deserved P2. I was almost certain they were going to win this race, but fate conspired against them, it seems. There we have it. P2 finish for Anssi Heitinen. Next up will be Nurmi, who seems to be struggling a little bit. Ledoux looks to be up next. Followed by Clio in the Amel car. And here comes Hayley Smith in the Bentley Blower. Nurmi is on track for a third place. Coming up to that final banked corner. See the banking there on the right hand side for the other part of the track. Uatila picks up 4th place, Kai Sivertsen 5th place, Withoft in 10th, Paul van Rosen 13th place. Here comes Nurmi for P3. And there we have it. Well-deserved P3 for Nurmi. Darling coming through for P6. That leaves Kayla Fredge for P7. Hallen picks up P12. Borkowski has disconnected, I think. So, yeah, they will be finishing in P14th. That just leaves La to bring it home for P8. Quite a bumpy ride in that last corner. But La bringing it over the line to conclude this race in totality, finishing in P8. Well, thank you everyone for being a part of the race today, and big thanks to Donington for organising as always. I've been Pirate Laserbeam for the commentary stream, and as always a pleasure to be here at CVR covering these races. And thanks to everyone in chat. Hope you all have a very good rest of the weekend, and we'll catch you next time for the next round